2500 inline ripper that we bought from Eric Reed. We're putting it to the test. Finally got done with corn harvest late last evening, and immediately got switched over to ripping some ground and winterizing our corn ground. I'm on the ripper today, trying to get ahead of Andy. Andy and Kelly are out spraying Infraction around the edges of our cornfield, just trying to get any big weeds that haven't gone to seed yet. Also other problem weeds, you know, goose grass, barnyard grass, trying to wipe it out. So hopefully, you know, it doesn't produce seed that we got to fight next year. It seems like the last couple of years, inroads have really been our big problem. As tight as money is this year, normally we would spray the entire field, but you know, looking out in the middle of the field, I mean, it's good and clean. I mean, there's really not much sense in spending, I don't know, that $5 or $6 an acre on Infraction to spray the middle of the fields. You know, hopefully that will speed them up getting done, so Andy can then get on the drill and start planting our cover crops, because we need to get them in the ground as soon as possible. Andy and Kelly ought to get all that spraying done, get hooked up to the drill, and be ready to start planting cover crops first thing Monday. And I've already ripped probably about 110, 120 acres, so I'm that far out in front of Andy. He's gonna run the drill behind where I've already ripped. And he can definitely drill a lot more today than what I can, so I'm trying to get as far out ahead of him as possible so he doesn't have to sit there and wait on it. Our drill covers 20 feet, our ripper's covering 19 feet. The thing is, he'll be able to drill about twice the speed of what I'm ripping at. We don't have beans quite ready yet. We got a couple fields we could probably get in there and cut, but the vast majority of our full season beans, you know, we had to replant at least spots in the field, and we originally planted a 4.8 maturity, and then it's probably it was at least a month and a half later we come in there and replant. We put a 4.2 maturity right in there. Unfortunately, that 4.2 maturity, it caught some of these late season rains, and they are green and happy. So quite a few videos ago, y'all saw us overhauling this ripper in the shop, and like I said, we've already done about 100 acres. We quickly found out that we had to make some changes on it. The first change we had to make on it was our plow points here. Now in our shop, I told you that we put, you know, we bought some points from Shoop and we put them on there. And initially, I liked to look at them. They were hard faced. They looked real substantial and everything else. And then anyway, after I put that video out, Eric Reed, who I bought this from, messaged me and he said, man, you're not gonna like those points. I mean, they do a job, but they leave way too much surface disturbance. I really don't think you're gonna be happy with those points, and you're gonna wind up putting the old ones back on. Well, needless to say, Eric was right. He knew what he was talking about. When we first got to the field, I did about 7 acres. And I can tell this one, this is one of the new points that Eric gave me. He had one, so we put this one on there, and then the other 5, we put the Shoop on there. And I could tell behind this shank right here, there was a lot less surface disturbance, whereas the others, you know, they're kind of bringing up clods, and it was definitely a lot more rough. Now, considering that we're not planning on doing any kind of surface tillage after this, any kind of seed bed preparation, you know, it's really important that we try to leave this seed bed as smooth as possible. So after I did that first 5, 6, 7 acres, I took it back to the shop and I put the old plow points on. You know, it started doing a whole lot better job. I mean, look right here where I've already run. I mean, yeah, we got a little bit of a slit there, but I mean, no clods or whatever. And then over the winter, you know, this will all settle back down, and this slit right here will kind of fill in, and we should have a pretty nice, smooth seed bed. Probably won't be quite as smooth as what it was, but it's going to be a whole lot smoother than the ground that we used the Infraction in last year. You know, I commented several times during planting, you know, it was plantable, but the fields were definitely a lot more rougher than what they were. So if y'all running any of these Case H inline rippers, Shoop sells two kinds of points. The ones that I bought, which are the cheap ones, you know, they do a good job, but they leave the ground a lot rougher. And then you got the kind of original equipment style points. The OEM points, if you're not going to do any kind of surface preparation behind the ripper, I would highly recommend that you stay with those style, because disturbance is a whole lot less. And these baskets back here, you know, they're not doing a whole heck of a lot, but any kind of clods that do get pulled up, it's definitely crushing them. It's also kind of firming that back down a little bit, kind of closing in the trench a little bit. And for us, I'm really happy with the job they're doing. They're doing what I hoped they would, and that's just ensuring we have as good of a seed bed after run this ripper as possible. Now onto my tractor. We had to make some changes to it also. You remember back this late winter, spring, we put all new plastic around the muffler and everything, and then put this heat shield around there because we'd had problems with the fiberglass shield and everything kind of melted the cover on our battery box. Well, we did that 5 or 6 acres with the old with the different plow points on there. I got to looking at it, smelling something. I'm like, this don't smell right. And anyway, you could tell a little bit where the muffler, even with that heat shield, was still getting too hot and was starting to melt it. So we wound up taking the heat shield and everything off. Now this tractor isn't stock. We have had it tuned. It's running, I think it's tuned for like either 10 or 15% above what the maximum level from the factory was. And stock, this horsepower is rated at 235 horsepower with a power boost up to 270 horsepower if you're running PTO or if you're on the road. So, you know, 10% above 235, you know, this tractor's running probably close to 260 horsepower. More horsepower means more fuel. Burning more fuel means more heat coming through the exhaust. So, just to protect the cover and everything, we took it off. We'll put it back on whenever we get done ripping. Now, does this tractor pull this 6-shank ripper? Yes, it does. Yes, it knows it's behind it also. It's everything that it wants. And you know, the first 80 acres I ripped, you know, it was pulling it, but I was getting a lot of wheel slippage, you know, 20 to 25% wheel slippage. So I knew I needed to try and add some more balance. So while the hurricane was here, that's what we did. We added some more wheel weights to it. These are 550 pounds a piece. We had 2 more, so we put it on that outside dual. This tractor, when we bought it used, it originally had it on there, but at the time I didn't need all that extra weight, so we just took these weights off, and then going to this ripping, found out we really need them, and it has helped out some. The tractor's still spinning a lot. I know I need a bigger tractor. I need a heavier tractor, and down the road I will have a bigger and heavier tractor. But right now, this is equipment that we've got, so we're trying to make it work as good as possible. And the extra wheel weights are helping some, but still, it's all it wants. So now we got another 1,100 pounds of ballast on it. Also, not gonna let my fuel tank drop below half full because that's extra ballast too. So, you know, we got a 100-gallon fuel tank on there, so half full, 50 gallons at 8 pounds a gallon, it's another 400 pounds. Whenever we get to about half a tank fuel, I'm gonna be hunting up the search truck. Anyway, I know some of y'all are saying, well, why are you ripping, man? I thought you were a no-till. I thought you were a no-till guy, soil health guy, and I am. I'm not changing my philosophy. But what we're dealing with on our farm, and there's actually millions of acres across the U.S., what we're dealing with is, you know, for the most part, pretty poor hill ground that's been highly eroded with, before we started no-tilling, it had been conventionally tilled and plowed up for well over a century. And we've lost a lot of that good topsoil. Like on this farm right here, I've dug soil pits, and a lot of places we've only got about 3 inches of topsoil on top of the ground, and then beneath that topsoil we got a 20 to 30 inch deep fragipan, and that's really limiting our crop productivity because that fragipan is such a hard, dense layer that most plant roots have a really, really hard time penetrating it. Water has a hard time penetrating it. And once you get below that fragipan, then you're back to what could be productive soil, because you got that layer in there. The roots just aren't able to access what's down below to bring up moisture and nutrients. Now this fragipan, it's different than a plow pan or different than compaction, because it's actually naturally occurring. It was actually formed during the last ice age when glaciers were covering this area. And it's actually a chemical reaction between the soil particles that turns it, concrete-like, where it's just not able to, be penetrated by a lot of roots, especially annual crops. Perennial plants probably have a better chance because, they don't ever die, and over the course of years they can penetrate it. But our annual crops that are only growing for about 4 months are just not able to penetrate it. You're probably asking, well, if it's a chemical reaction in the soil, how is plowing going to help it? Because plowing's not going to break the chemical reaction, and you would be right. Well, what we have found is that the cover crops that we're going to plant, annual ryegrass in specific, has the ability to exude a certain substance through its roots that helps dissolve that fragipan. So what we're trying to do with this ripper is get those plow points as deep down into that fragipan as possible, break it up temporarily, so when we plant our cover crops in the annual ryegrass, the annual ryegrass has an easier path to send its roots down into the fragipan and slowly start dissolving it over the course of years. If you recall my video from back this spring when Dr. Lloyd Murdoch from the University of Kentucky visited our farm and did a bunch of probing, he was able to document that, yes, we are making improvements in dissolving that fragipan. The problem is, it's just a very slow process. So what we're trying to do with this ripper is really speed up that process, because, I'm a good middle ways through my career, so I don't want to be reaching my goals on the tail end of my career. So if I can help speed up that process, and I believe running this ripper will help speed up that process, it's just going to mean that we're going to be making more profit sooner. So there's something about annual ryegrass roots, what they exude, that helps break that chemical bond between the soil particles. Problem is, it's just so slow. But if we get those roots on down in there a lot quicker, theoretically it should speed up the process. Now I also know that, there are some areas of compaction out here. When you're no-till, you're just going to have compaction, especially in the high traffic areas, where we load grain, where we go in and out of the fields, the inroads and everything. We got an 875 bushel grain cart toting 48,000 pounds across the field. We got a module cotton picker that weighs 70,000 pounds that's running over pretty much every square inch of ground on the field. I do know that we do have issues with compaction in some areas, but compared to the average farmer in this area, I would say our compaction issues are a lot less, just due to the cover crops helping break up that compaction, helping keep the roots in the ground. So because of that, break up compaction is not our ultimate goal, although I know we are getting that side benefit in the areas where we do have it. I just think it's a very minor problem when compared to that naturally occurring fragipan that we're trying to get rid of. So anyway, in case you didn't know what a ripper is supposed to do, yes, it is a tillage implement, but an inline ripper is really not meant to disturb the soil a whole lot. What it's meant to do is get a narrow plow point deep in the ground that's curved, and what it does is it lifts up on the soil, and when it lifts up on the soil, it fractures the soil and creates channels, and then once the plow point is run past, the soil sets back down just like it was, but it's fractured. It's not turned over, it's not mixed or anything like that, it's just fractured. And what that does is any kind of compaction layers that you got, the fragipan, it creates, these fractures that roots then have an opportunity to grow down through. The thing is to get the roots to grow down through there before the soil kind of seals itself back up again, which will happen over time, especially with a fragipan, because again, it's a chemical reaction between soil particles that, you know, until you break that chemical bond, the soil will then seal itself back up in the fragipan. But like I said, we're going to be following this right with our drill, planting our cover crops, and hopefully we can get roots down into those channels before it seals back up over the winter. You know, it really seemed to work out really good last year with our cover crop. Where we ripped, we saw at least twice as much biomass as what we did where we didn't rip. And you know, some of it was creating those channels for roots to get down, but also because the soil was fractured, we were able to get more oxygen down in the soil. And you know, wintertime soils are typically saturated much of the winter. You know, if the soils are saturated, you know, you don't have as much room for oxygen in the soil, so it really allowed us to get more oxygen down in the soil to allow our cover crops to really grow a lot more biomass. And if we had a lot more above ground biomass, we most definitely had a lot more below ground biomass, which is just going to speed up our soil rejuvenation process that much quicker. Now, back this summer when we had this thing in the shop, Eric had it set on 30-inch spacing, and then we moved it out to 38-inch spacing. And there's a couple reasons. For one reason, it allows us to cover more ground quickly because it's wider, but the row spacing on our planter that we plant our cotton and our soybeans on is 38-inch row spacing. And what I'm doing is I'm using my guidance lines from planting, and we're ripping, we're running those ripping points right on top of the old row, and you know, we're fracturing that root zone that we will then plant back into. And normally in a ripper, when you watch in between the points back there, you'll see kind of a wave where the points are lifting the whole profile up and then setting it back down. You really see it obviously when there's 30-inch spacing in between the points. Now with it set on 38-inch spacing, I'm not seeing that as much, but when we get to the places that I know that are compacted, you know, high traffic areas, I am able to see that ripple effect. So even though we're 8 inches wider in between the points, I know where we have compaction, we're still getting a good fracture all the way in between point to point. But you know, ultimately, I'm not so concerned with soil in between the rows. I'm most concerned about that rooting zone and creating channels for our cash crops roots to grow in. So even if we're not getting 100% fracture all the way through the middles in between the rows, you know, I'm not as concerned, because you know, the only time we got something growing there is when we got wheat or soybeans. But I still believe we're getting a pretty good fracture in between the rows also. Now we don't have a speed demon here. You know, about between 3 and 4 miles an hour is what this thing is able to pull. It just depending on how hard the ground is, you know, how far down into that fragipan that we're getting. You know, if we get into a place that's got real good topsoil with you know, no compaction, you know, it'll pull it on, you know, 4.5 miles an hour easy. But like right here, we're on the side of the hill, no topsoil, going deep down the fragipan. I mean, it's pulling the tractor hard. You know, we're running 100% engine load, 1.4 gallons per acre. It's giving this tractor all that it wants. So you can see that wheel slip percentage, you know, between 15–20%. Now, is this going to be an every year process? No, it's not. I mean, there's no way I could rip all my acres every year. At the very most, it's going to be like a once every 3-year process, because that's kind of our rotation. Because about the only time that I can do this is right after we get done with corn harvest, and that's the optimal time to do it, because typically there after corn harvest, the soil is about as dry as it ever is throughout the year. You know, the corn crop just got growing, pulling all that soil moisture out of the soil. You know, probably haven't had many rains. And that's really what you want, is dry soil to do a really good job of fractioning the soil. Just think about it. You take a dry dirt clod and you drop it on to a concrete slab. I mean, what is it going to do? It's going to shatter into powder. And now take a mud ball and drop it on the concrete. You know, it's going to stay together. So the drier the soil is, the better that it will shatter. And before Hurricane Francine came through, I know we were getting fantastic shattering. So that, you know, first 100 acres that I did or so, I know it did an excellent job of that. Now, it's been almost a week since it rained last, and the soils are really dry. We got about 5 inches of rain. So that's that's given our fields some time to dry up, giving some of that moisture in the soil, giving it a chance to kind of percolate down through. And while I'm pretty sure it's probably not fractioning the soil as good as it was before, it's still dry enough out here that, you know, when you see the whole soil profile being lifted up, you know you're still doing some good down there. You know, right now I'm hoping this is a one and done. We do this one time, we open the soil up, and then we get roots down into those fractures, and then we don't have to do this again, as long as we keep roots on this land, you know, 12 months out of the year is kind of what I'm hoping. However, you know, I'm a realist, and you know, we're not going to get rid of that fragipan in just a couple years. So I anticipate probably in another 3 years, when I have corn, I'll probably try ripping this ground again, maybe seeing if the ripper pulls a little bit easier. You know, if I can, and get some equipment out here to pull some soil probes, to pull some soil cores to see how much of that fragipan we've dissolved. Because once we get the fragipan dissolved, as long as we don't compact the soil, you know, there shouldn't be any need to run this ripper. Now, how long is that going to take, though? I don't have any idea, you know. But we're going to do our best to find out just how long this process takes. You know, hopefully, you know, ultimately my goal is that once we get that fragipan dissolved, the only time that we need to pull the ripper out is when we need to go over, you know, the high traffic areas, the entrances to the field, where the semi-truck, you know, parks, you know, where we store the cotton modules, all that kind of stuff, you know, because I know we're going to have some compaction there. But the rest of the field, hopefully we won't have any compaction and won't need to run this again. You know, quite a few folks rip their ground because they're trying to break up compaction caused by prior year's worth of tillage, what we call a plow pan. And normally those plow pans are pretty shallow. They're only at the depth that the implement was run. You know, say you got a plow pan coming from a disc, you know, it's only going a few inches deep. You know, you might only need to rip about, you know, 4, 5, or 6 inches deep to break that up. Or if it comes from a breaking plow, you know, maybe you only need to rip around 12 inches deep. Well, the last tillage, the majority of our farm saw came between like 1998 and 2002. That's when we started transitioning over to no-till. So I'm not really worried about any plow pans. You know, any plow pans that we had would have been dissolved by our cover crops over the course of a lot of years. But like I said earlier, our goal is to get that fragipan. And right now, this ripper, we're running it as deep as the gauge wheels will allow. We got the gauge wheels raised all the way up, and I measured it, and it should be somewhere around 20-21 inches deep into the ground is what we're ripping at. So we're getting on down there pretty good. I mean, realistically, this plow is going where no plow has ever gone before on our farm, because we've never had anything that could get this deep. You know, before this, you know, when we were doing full-scale conventional tillage, about the deepest that we could go was with our chisel plow, and we're probably running it about 12 inches deep or so. So we're getting a whole lot deeper right now than anything we've ever done previously in my career. Well, over here on Clanton Farm, we got to a part of the field that this thing is pulling surprisingly easy. I mean, over 4 miles an hour. Sometimes it might get up to 5 miles an hour, which is our target speed. And I look behind me to see if maybe we had a shear bolt broken, one of my shanks, and it was flopping up. But no, they're all in the ground doing what they're supposed to do. But anyway, we just got to a part of this farm that was one of the highest yielding spots on this farm. I mean, we was pulling some dang good corn out of this spot, and apparently, because it's pulling easy, we got good deep topsoil. We're not really getting down to a fragipan. Also, no compaction or anything. Really not seeing the ground rippling up behind me there. So that's something we're really finding out about this ripper. In the worst, in the poor yielding spots, it's definitely pulling. It's definitely pulling a lot harder than it is in the good yielding spots. Now, we haven't tried any good bottoms yet. Hopefully I'll get a chance to try some of them, but based on my experience on good yielding hill parts, it ought to pull a lot easier down here at the bottoms.